time. We may not get into some of the details on Baptist history just yet, but I'm afraid, as I said last week, that it may be wasted on us if we've not prepared ourselves. And I say that, reiterating what I said last week. If you constantly take the past and re-examine it from your understanding, or from a point of view that we are now on the mountain peak of Christianity, and it's up to us as spiritual investigators to determine who in our past is worthy to bear our name, I'm afraid you're going to go in with a biased opinion. Because I have news for you. When you read your Bible, as we near the last days, we're not seeing in God's prophetic plan and in His foresight a church that is thriving and strong and waiting their Master's return. We're seeing a weakened, watered down, tired, faithless group of people that maybe have forgotten where they came from. So if you examine your past and you're looking from a higher point of view in your pride, it's your past, and when you find one you like, say, all right, they're like us, it may skew you, and you may miss the fact that we need to beware not to wander off the straight and narrow, off the path that God has carved out within history. Now, we said last week that was important because Jesus said He would build the church Himself. Not the Catholic Church, not Constantine, not the Roman Empire, not even America is not going to build that church. Jesus will build it. And if we fall, which every nation is yet to be exempt from that inevitable demise, if we fall, God's church will roll on until He comes again. I promise you, the gospel cannot be killed. And it is not up to you and I to guarantee its existence, but it is up to you and I to guard it with our lives. That is up to you and I. So I want to challenge you tonight as we go through this, really understand how the church went from one man who was God, calling 12 men, teaching them His word, fulfilling prophecy, dying on a cross, being buried, raised again, going back to the men He had called in the group that met in His name. And when He sent them out and He empowered them and He gave them all the authority they needed to do God's will on earth, that is an unbroken chain from the time of Christ all the way to right now. And I want to tell you, it's going to be unbroken until the last person who gets saved breathes his last or meets Christ in the air when He comes again. When God said He's going to build something, He will see it through. The church cannot be overcome by the powers of hell. The gates are powerless to stop it. Now, either you believe God or you don't. Now, I believe Him. And I am convinced that that church is indestructible. And I am convinced that as Christ laid that foundation, get this in your mind. It's a phenomenal topic, and I don't have time to go into all the details. But I want you to understand God has given you all the fine-tuning of what the church is. He calls the church His body. So it was needful that Christ would come, that He would die, and that as you and I got saved, we'd be added to that body. We'd be in Him and Him in us. He's the chief cornerstone. So as you imagine a building, a structure, and that's a very good illustration the Bible uses because you and I, when we think of church, what do we think of? A structure, right? So we use analogy. But I've got news for you. You know this, but the church is not a structure. We use one, but the church is not one. Because when we leave here tonight, you are still the church. You are. The church is His body. That's what the Bible says. Now, He's the chief cornerstone, and then with Him being the chief cornerstone, He built the church upon the foundations of the apostles and the prophets. There you understand when the church found its inception. That is when she began. Now, having said that, you have these wonderful, strange underpinnings of Old Testament passages that point to the church. I always like to put it this way. God was gathering building materials in the Old Testament generation. Because what you find is He talks about a church in the wilderness. And you see a congregation that meets in a mobile, makeshift tabernacle. That's what you see in the Old Testament. You see elders, you see congregation, you see worship, you see singing, you see preaching, you see pulpits of wood, and you even see offerings and alms and tithes as pastors have been preaching. You see all the nuts and the bolts. And so when Christ appears and He gets ready to reveal His ultimate plan, and that's what it was. Okay, Christ's coming is the most significant event in history that eclipses any other person, any other plan. despite God working with the Jews and calling them to himself, when Christ's feet walked upon the dirt of Judea, God was revealing himself to man. And it would become the most significant event that man's ever seen. And so knowing that, I want you to see how important it was that when those men heard that preaching, when they were moved, that those around them, including themselves, understood that it was something new that they'd never seen. Last week we looked at how it's referred to as the way. They said he went after the way, that way, this way. They started to refer to it that way. And I want you to look at some passages today. Let's look at Acts chapter 24. We'll look at this first, and then we'll look at a couple others, and we probably won't take too long tonight, but I just want to hit this. Acts chapter 24, verse 1. And after 5 days, Ananias the high priest ascended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. So Paul's preaching this doctrine of the way, this group, this sect. Now, it's developed, it's mature. They have specific doctrines, specific preachers. They meet in specific places. They're connected with a specific individual. You say who? Look at verse 2. And when he was called forth, so they hired this preacher that can really speak. And just for those of you that like to listen to sermons on the radio and you rant and rave about how great and how smooth they talk, look, there's a lot of orators, but it takes a preacher full of some guts to tell you where you and I are wrong. Preaching is not orating. Preaching is letting you know where you need to get right and get right with God. I know a guy, he's a missionary. He believes that preaching and teaching are the same. I say, well, they can't be. They're different words. Not only that, they have different goals. Not only that, I've never sat in the class and heard a professor teach me anything, and I got mad at him when he was done. But you're a preacher. You preach 5 minutes. Chances are you're going to make someone mad. You say, well, I'm not mad. Well, your face may say otherwise, all right? So he says they call this guy out, Tertullus, and he begins to accuse him, saying, seeing that by thee we enjoy great quietness, and that very worthy deeds are done unto this nation by thy providence, we accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Flattery. Oh, you're so amazing, and that's what you're going to find. You click on anything, and it's going to be, we're great, we're wonderful, we're just a tip of the spear. My daughter just finished one of her degrees before she came back here, and one of the classes was American exceptionalism. You say, well, don't you believe in that? Absolutely. We're exceptional in our consumption of pornography. We're exceptional in our crime rate. We're exceptional in how we don't bear responsibility and raise our own kids. We are exceptional in how we outsource our worst types of people and demeanor and our personalities. And we will not, by any person's preaching, teaching, and helping, be told by anybody anything that we don't like. We are exceptional. Verse 4, notwithstanding, I be not further tedious unto thee, faker. I pray thee that thou wouldest hear us of thy clemency a few words. For we have found this man, talking about Paul, a pestilent fellow, and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader, of the sect, I want you to notice that, of the Nazarenes. Now, that word sect right there and the word in verse 14, heresy, are the same Greek word. Heresis is what it is. So he says, we found this guy, and he's a ringleader of this cult, this heresy, this sect, this deviation from the orthodox. A man that dares teach something that our fathers never taught. He's a ringleader, and he must be stopped. He's part of that group that followed the Nazarene. Now, this is where the Nazarene church thinks they find their beginning. Yeah, see, they were called back then followers of the Nazarenes, so to beat out the Baptists, we're the church of the Nazarene, not the Baptists. Well, the Baptists aren't worried about naming themselves. They're worried about preaching the gospel. Should be anyway. Should be. And so they get back to here and say we're the Nazarenes instead of just believing God and His Word and following Him. I hate it that the word Christianity has been hijacked by every type of group that isn't Christian. But do not be embarrassed of that, and don't be afraid of the word church. Now, as you study Baptist history, a lot of people make a division. They say, well, I want to study Baptist history, not church history. Baptist history is church history. Because anything that is not based off the church that Jesus Himself built is not a church. So I'm not going to forfeit that term. I'm not going to give up ground. Baptist history is church history because I believe that God's church will go on. So he says we've got this group, this sect, this heresy, and they're following the Nazarene. Verse 6, who also hath gone about to profane the temple, whom we took and would have judged according to our law. But the chief captain Lysias came upon us with great violence, took him away out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come unto thee, by examining of whom thyself mayest take knowledge of all these things whereof we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, saying that these things were so. Then Paul, after that the governor had beckoned unto him to speak, answered, forasmuch as I know that thou hast been of many years a judge unto this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. I don't need to go hire an orator. I'll answer for myself, thank you very much. And you and I are to be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh of you a reason of the hope that's in you with meekness and fear. Paul says, I will speak for myself and what I believe. Verse 11, because that thou mayest understand that there are yet but 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem for to worship, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people, neither in the synagogues, nor in the city. Neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. But this I confess unto thee, that after the way, there it is, after the way, the ordos, the path, a specific set of doctrines, after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets. So we'll start off tonight and pick up where we left off last week. As other people observed Paul and what he was teaching, they were attributing it to a specific way, a set of doctrines. And I believe personally that was because of an Old Testament teaching that John the Baptist represented when he appeared. Now you remember John was sent. I want you to look at Isaiah 40. We'll just look at a couple of these and we'll kind of get this tied together. Why do they keep calling it the way? Remember Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life, right? One way and only one. Well, John was sent to prepare a way. Look at Isaiah chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40. I want you to look at verse 3. The voice of him that crieth in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert, what? A highway for our God. Okay, so there's an Old Testament prophecy. God says, I'm going to send somebody, and he's going to do something, and this something that he does is going to stand out. And this is important, because we're going to tie this back in with John the Baptist. Did you ever think, why in the world did Jesus need to be baptized by John? I don't care which angle you take on that or how you explain what exactly went on there. It is significant that Jesus went as far as he did and demanded that he would receive baptism at the hand of John. In fact, it was so astonishing that when he showed up to receive it, John himself said, no, I can't baptize you. And he says, look, suffer it to be so for now, because by this we're going to fulfill all righteousness. And he said, it's you and I want people to see something, and so Jesus gets baptized. And by doing that, he proved that baptism can never save anybody. Could it be that Christ, the only propitiation for sin, needs to be saved before he can save you? And would he be saved by the likes of one John the Baptist? No! Baptism can't save you. And so Jesus received baptism, but it wasn't just that he accomplished and proved. When Jesus received that baptism, I believe he was reminding Israel of the promise that there would be somebody and there would be a voice, and it would come out of the wilderness by the river Jordan, and in there he would be offering to God's people repentance and faith. A new thing is what the Bible calls it. So here he says, there's a voice crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Now he jumps from Christ coming the first time to Christ coming the second time. Verse 4, every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places plain. So John was that person. All four Gospels point you to this passage and a few others, saying that John was specifically selected by Christ to be the forerunner, to prepare the way. Prepare the way for what? For Christ to come, for him to establish his church, for him to teach things that Israel should have known. And so when Paul makes reference to this way, this teaching, this doctrine, this thing that arrested him and brought him to God, he is specifically allowing them to realize, I believe everything the Bible already taught in the Old Testament. I've not deviated. I've only received Christ, who is that rock, that cornerstone. I want you to look at another one. Look at Matthew. Look at Matthew chapter 11, I believe. Matthew chapter 11, concerning John. Matthew chapter 11. Now, I want to be careful with this because I've heard some, and it's been preached that, well, John was a Baptist, and so the Baptist church here, he gave Jesus water baptism, so Jesus was a Baptist. So I'm not ready to leap off that cliff just yet. But what I am willing to point to is that John did indeed baptize Christ. And in Acts chapter 1, when they sought a replacement for Judas, one of the requirements was that they had been with them from the time of John all the way to when Christ was taken up. Something in their mind associated what happened with the church with that time period is what I'm trying to get you to see. And in Matthew chapter 11, concerning John, verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass when Jesus had made an end of commanding his 12 disciples, he departed thence to teach and to preach in their cities." Verse 2. "Now when John had heard in the prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples, and said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see." Now I want you to notice how Christ responds to John's inquiry. Verse 5, "The blind receive their sight," number 1. "And the lame," number 2. "The lepers are cleansed," number 3. "And the deaf hear," number 4. "The dead are raised up," number 5. "And the poor have the gospel preached unto them."